Hi, this is Rick from For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. I got a friend, his name is Dan. He's a fellow pastor, and I played a practical joke on him when we were younger, way back in the day when, well, like still now, when we couldn't afford very much. We were at McDonald's together, and he had just a regular hamburger combo from McDonald's, and he finished the combo, and he was still hungry, and he looked mournfully, longingly at his empty uh, box container of fries. And he says, "Man, I wish they had refills on the fries." And I said, "They do." And I convinced him that McDonald's had free refills on their fries. I pointed out to the little recycling symbol that was at the bottom of the box. And then I pointed to his cup, which also had the little recycling symbol at the bottom of the cup. And I said, "Look, these two have these little symbols on it because anything that's refillable will have this symbol on it." And of course, back then, the hamburger came in some kind of non-recyclable thing like styrofoam or something. I mean, we were talking back in like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I think. That's the only reason this story makes sense, because people were just figuring out what the recycling symbol looked like. And so I was really playing him up, and he was beginning to get convinced. And I said to him, "Listen, I am so certain that this means that your fries are refillable. I will walk up to the counter with you and ask with you to get this refill of fries." And of course, I just wanted to be close to laugh at him when he did it. So he was convinced enough that I walked with him. We went up to the front. He talked to the cashier and he said, "Can I have a refill on the fries?" And the cashier, a young teenage girl, just looks at him and like, "No, we don't do that here." And then he points out the little symbol at the bottom. He says, "Yeah, but this symbol right here, just like in the cup, it means you do that." And she's like, "No, that that symbol means recycling." And so I lost it. I laughed. We were at the front of the line. The McDonald's was full. I was laughing at him, and something turned. Something happened to the cashier. Her face took on a different expression. It's like she felt his pain as I was laughing at him, and she became very nurturing in that moment. And I remember her reaching out, taking the empty container of fries from my friend and going and filling them up and giving it back to him. He says, "There you go. I'm sorry your friend laughed at you." And just like that. And they both turned to me and they kind of giggled at me. He totally won. The practical joke backfired on me, and he ended up with the win, and I had the loss. How about you? Can you think of a moment when you attempted to play a practical joke on one of your friends and it backfired like mine did on me? If you're watching with someone, please pause the video and share your story. This video is based on my thoughts around Psalm chapter 10. In part of this psalm, we see the writer lamenting about how distant God is and how lonely it feels without him around. And we see some comments around the behavior of others and how the writer is being treated and he hates it. In my opinion, we're looking at a psalm that reveals to us what life without nurture looks like. Psalm chapter 10, verses 1 through 3 and 17 to 18. "O Lord, why do you stand so far away? Why do you hide when I'm in trouble? The wicked arrogantly hunt down the poor. Let them be caught in the evil they plan for others, for they brag about their evil desires. They praise the greedy and curse the Lord." Verse 17. "Lord, you know the hopes of the helpless. Surely you will hear their cries and comfort them. You will bring justice to the orphans and the oppressed, so mere people can no longer terrify them."
Haha, can't catch me. What? Oh,
You okay?
yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Ooh, look, the For Community video just came out.
We need to make sure we look in the background for the cool characters.
Yeah, we need to make sure we watch that when we get home. Oh, and also connect HQ, of course.
Here's the point that I'm going to attempt to make for this psalm as I see it. We desperately need nurture. In this psalm, I'm only going to take the first part and the last part because those are two parts that really jumped out to me. While I was reading this, the first part and the last part just came to life to me as I was reflecting on the role of nurture and what life looks like when we're missing that nurture, and how oftentimes the things that we might say is a pathology, the things that we might say is sinful behavior, is actually a result of, it's our behavior based on a lack of nurture and us adapting to the kind of life we need to live without the kind of love we need to have in order to live a healthy life. So I've got 2 points to share with you around this idea that we desperately need nurture. Here's the first point that jumps out to me as I interpret the psalm, the way that I see this. Our fundamental problem is a lack of nurture. The text says, "O Lord, why do you stand so far away? Why do you hide when I am in trouble?" As the psalm starts out, I was initially hearing a really painful plea from someone who felt absolutely abandoned, absolutely lonely. And then it's followed up with words that really paint this very oppressive picture that someone very alone is being taken advantage of. And then as I continue to read, I notice more and more these parts about the wicked. Wicked people attack others. They brag, they celebrate the greedy, they curse God. And I notice that people in general don't describe themselves like this. I don't describe myself like this. But generally speaking, this is kind of all of us. All of us act the ways that are listed in the psalm from time to time, from a greater degree to a lesser degree. I wouldn't say that we're all evil. I wouldn't say that we're all wicked, but we do act like this sometimes. We brag about our accomplishments occasionally. And while we're bragging, there are others spending their last dime on groceries for their kids, right? We kind of celebrate greediness all the time. I mean, when one of my friends or just some stranger even that I just kind of know happens to buy a new motorcycle, I am celebrating with that person and we're getting on the motorcycle and going out, I don't know, to like Tim Hortons for a coffee or something, because that's what a guy with 4 kids does these days on his motorcycle. Let's go get coffee. Wild and crazy. So we do that. We celebrate this, and we can call it greediness, while someone is spending their last dime on groceries for their kids, right? Now, I wouldn't say out loud that we are too proud to seek God, but I would say as a culture, as a society, we generally don't find God in our top 10 list of the things that we need to do each day. This is normal human stuff. I see the lament, I hear the loneliness, and I see all of these actions. The acts of the wicked remind me of why we're cut off from God. And it might not be exactly why we think. We're not cut off from God because we were made initially bad. We were cut off from God because we made a choice. And it wasn't the choice to do bad. Initially, God was our source of nurture. By an act of deception, the Bible teaches that the serpent deceived Eve. By an act of deception, Adam and Eve chose to walk away from that nurture, believing that humanity, that we, were capable of nurturing ourselves apart from God. Like, you can know what God knows. You can be God for yourself. You don't need to stay attached to God to be all that you want to and need to be. You can go it on your own. We made a choice, we, the royal we, Adam and Eve made that choice for us, to disconnect from God, being deceived and believing that we could self-nurture. I think that that's what's going on in the garden. We're filled up with self-belief instead of accepting God at his word and accepting the fact that we need God's nurture. But the reality is, we can't self-nurture. Love, security, attachment, and a sense of worth are essential to our health. These are the things we all had all of the time before the fall. The psalm begins by lamenting how distant God is. God is distant because we unplugged from our source. We unplugged from our place of nurture. Because God is distant, humanity has adapted as we've tried to figure out how to be self-sufficient, living without the need of God or others. And that, frankly, is impossible because we're not self-sufficient. We can't live without God. We can't live without others. Humanity, without the nurture that it desperately needs, it chooses an adaptive behavior and it lashes out. We lash out against others based on this adaptation that we've had to do to try to figure out how to live life with the lack of the nurture that we desperately need. We have a core wound. That core wound is a result of our lack of nurture we need from God and from each other. Verses 2 and 3 is the result of the attempts to adapt to living without that nurture, living at a deficit, mitigating too few resources, living without the nurture that we so desperately need. Within the center of the heart of a sinful person is a core wound. One of the problems I notice in theology around our attempt to discern the origin of sin is this. If anything exists, God must have created it, because nothing exists without God having created it. But it is hard to imagine a good and loving God ever creating sin. So why does sin exist? Okay, well, what happens when something that's good and pure and perfect? What happens when something is removed from creation that creation can't live without? Like nurture, like love. God didn't create sin. We were not born bad. You were not born bad. Have you done bad things? Oh, sure. God didn't create you bad. God loves you. And he put a lot of effort and work into you because he loves you so much. You weren't born bad. You weren't created to choose evil. Creation is lacking and has adapted to that lack. It's lacking the nurture we desperately need. God's image that he created in us and the original beauty of creation is tarnished. It's tarnished because of the presence of something God never wanted, and that's sin. It's tarnished because we chose to unplug from the source of nurture, and now we're surrounded by decay due to a lack of nurture. The psalmist laments over the distance of God and the presence of decay, and here's the answer. Here it comes. Here's my second point, the answer to this decay. Our quintessential answer is a return to nurture. The text says, Lord, you know the hopes of the helpless. Surely you will hear their cries and comfort them. You will bring justice to the orphans and the oppressed, so mere people can no longer terrify them. The last two verses make me think of the nurture that is being offered by God. God hasn't abandoned us. He never did. Humanity chose to walk away from God through Adam and Eve and still chooses to stay disconnected from God. However, those who will choose to connect can receive some of that nurture that we desperately need. And this looks like God knowing us. It looks like God knowing our hopes. It looks like God hearing our cries and God comforting us, God helping the orphans and the oppressed. It's living without fear. God isn't going to fully restore the nurture we desperately need until after Jesus comes back. At that time, we will enjoy eternal life. Life as God originally intended. Life without decay. Life without the absence of nurture. Life without the signs of adaptation to the lack of what we desperately need. For now, God offers us a return to love and nurture through Jesus, connection with him, and connection with other. And he leaves us with this command, this very healing command. Love God first and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus gives us this greatest commandment, not to make our life harder, but so that we can return to what we lost, nurture from God and nurture from and for each other. Here's the takeaway. As I was thinking about my interpretation of this, something just struck my heart, struck me right in the brain. And I said, I think that this makes sense. When you feel like putting yourself into the place of the psalmist, lamenting about how absent God seems to be and how evil people seem to be, like we're all kind of that. Here's the takeaway. Try to see yourself and others as people attempting to exist without nurture. If we're able to see each other as though we're all starving for nurture, maybe it'll give us a little bit more grace for ourselves and for others. And maybe we'll be more greatly inspired to reach out to Jesus and to connect with him. That's it from me to you for now. Would you please like? Would you please share? Would you please subscribe? Would you also please ask for the link? We have 2 gatherings right now. If that's not enough, I'd be happy to make another one. Also, would you please consider supporting For Community? If you look down in the description, you'll see a link that you can use. For Community, creating community spaces so that you can connect with others and also with God. See you next time.